Every now and then, you come across a disease that's so horrible and so terrible that it can drive a species to extinction. There's a particular disease that has been in the news recently, and it's been described as one of the worst diseases in the world. It's driven more species to extinction than any other pathogen in recorded history, and now it's being spread across the world because of humans and our globalized commercial activity. The disease is called BD, which is a short, cute little acronym for Batrachochytrium dendrobatitis. This BD is a fungus, and it most commonly infects amphibians. These infected amphibians will suffer as their skin is eaten away by the fungus, and eventually they die of heart failure. 2 decades ago, it was suspected that this fungal pathogen was causing 200 species of amphibian to decline or go into extinction. A new study coming out of the Australian National University suggests that the modern-day reality is much worse. The research team, led by Ben Scheel, estimated that the disease has caused major declines in over 500 amphibian species, which comprise about 6.5% of all known amphibian species. That's a really big chunk that are being threatened by this one pathogen. Of these 500 or so species, the vast majority of them have been driven into extinction, and the ones that remain have had their numbers reduced by more than 90%. So it's a disease that has just savaged them. It just devastated them. The devastation caused by this single pathogen is incredible. BD can spread through the water and persist for a long time outside its hosts. When it does find a host amphibian, it finds the chemicals on its skin to be irresistible, and the amphibian's skin turns into a buffet, and it gets consumed in a frenzy of fungal feeding. Ben Scheel, who led the research, compares BD to an invasive species, like mongoose or cats. In their paper, the researchers talk a lot about how the movement of peoples in our globally interconnected civilization has allowed fungal pathogens, in addition to a wide variety of other pathogens and other invasive species, to easily spread to new habitats. Ben Scheel said, quote, "Cats have been a plague on biodiversity over generations, and they eat everything. And yet, BD, whose impacts we have only been able to measure for decades, already far outstrips the cats and the rats in terms of the species affected." Unquote. The one bit of good news here, and it's only good news in a very macabre sort of way, is that the rate of infection and the rate of population decline in the affected amphibians has started to slow down. BD seems to have done the brunt of its damage in the late 80s and the early 90s, but now it's burned through so many frogs and salamanders that it seems to be winding down. It's like a disease that's killed so many people that there's no one left to infect, and because of that, it's starting to die off. So again, it's some good news, but in a very twisted, macabre kind of way. However, the good news is diluted further because this doesn't mean that BD outbreaks will stop happening entirely, or that they won't spread. Currently, there's a lot of fear that BD will spread to Papua New Guinea, which right now doesn't have BD, but it does have a whole lot of amphibians. Papua New Guinea is one of the most biodiverse places in the world with respect to amphibians. So if a strain of BD can make it onto the shores of Papua New Guinea, all of that amphibian biodiversity is put at serious risk. It can all be destroyed within a decade. Another researcher on the study was Karen Lips from the University of Maryland. In an interview, when discussing controlling the spread of BD, she said, quote, "There's no obvious way to deal with this," unquote. That's pretty scary. If you're dealing with a problem, you don't want the researchers in the know to say, "We don't know how to deal with it," because that's a problem. That's a serious problem. Later in the interview, she was talking about other methods being devised to deal with BD, like breeding more tolerant frogs, moving frogs to areas where BD can't live, genetically modifying the BD fungus so it isn't pathogenic, or even inoculating frogs with defensive bacteria that can fight off the fungus. But so far, none of these proposed solutions have reached a point where they're viable. Ms. Lips said, quote, "It says a lot about the scary nature of the disease that even after intense, long-term collaborations, we haven't come up with a viable solution." Unquote.